YouTube truly is an interesting place at the end of the day. It's a place that favors individuals and individuals with creative ideas, and allows people to take risks that something like television would just not allow. In theory, anyway. Most of the big content creators on YouTube are just individuals, or individuals with unique ideas. And one of the biggest was Game Theory, starring matpat, who then later went on to make many other channels that were not as successful, but still pretty successful nonetheless in their own right, and created one of the greatest legacies on YouTube, and then left on good terms. But Game Theory has took a notable decline in quality over the years. Not to say old Game Theory was perfect, but there is a notable change. Maybe that has to do with the overall shift of YouTube, or maybe there's something bigger to this. And that's ultimately what I wanted to cover today. Whatever happened to Game Theory, and why did I and so many others suddenly lose interest in Game Theory over the years? Did Game Theory just get bad, or was there a notable trend in Game Theory that just made it worse over time? Simple answer, it's a bit complicated. But we like a bit complicated around here. I'm also gonna have to do this one alone, as Mimo is currently being transferred over to the new Mimo Vision. And this one will be a lot more high quality. Hopefully. So no sassy robot companion for this episode. Not that you would particularly be interested in the topic anyway. But with that, let's dive right into it and find out whatever happened to Game Theory. But before we can figure out where something went wrong, we first need to figure out where Game Theory went right. Simple answer, it was a winning idea. You take video game concepts, you apply science to them, and you see how they would actually work in real life. Very simple, really. Although Game Theory in its initial stages was not just Game Theory, it was The Game Theorist after all, as you had two other shows, most notably Digressing and Side Questing with Ronnie, and Culture Shock / Culture Exchange with Gaijin Goomba. It's also gone by a couple different names, but that's beside the point. And together they formed the original Game Theorists. But let's be real here, only Game Theory was the one that survived. Culture Shock / Game Exchange / whatever else it's called was a good concept. The problem is, it was just a bit too niche for Game Theory. Gaijin Goomba has a decent following on YouTube, so it's clear people are interested in this sort of thing, just not on Game Theory. And Digressing and Side Questing, yeah, this one's a bit more complicated. While it is inherently a cool concept, especially explaining how things actually work, such as showing how Doom isn't actually 3D, the problem is Ronnie stretched himself way too thin. He was working on regular Game Theory as well as Digressing and Side Questing, which basically meant episodes got pushed back, and pushed back hard. And I also should mention later on he did take his own life, which is quite sad and no doubt took a huge mental toll on matpat and many of his other friends who knew him. It was no doubt a dark time for matpat, losing not only a friend but one of the founding members of Game Theory, one of the people that made your channel what it is today. But despite all that, Game Theory was a huge success. And the concepts and ideas pretty much varied, but all had one connecting thing, that being science. An example I can give is, say, the Assassin's Creed Leap of Faith mechanic. What he would do is analyze the mechanic, use real-world examples, and see if we can figure out, is it possible to actually survive a fall like this? You do that for many different topics, and you got a winning formula. It also helped that matpat was pretty broad with his topics. It could range from math, science, to even psychology. But an important factor was it was related to gaming. That's not to say all the early theories are good. No, there were quite a few that were just kind of stinkers. Like the Pyro's gender episode. Yeah, the evidence is quite flimsy. Or the Link is dead theory. Yeah, that one's also quite flimsy. But still, they were all in good fun at the end of the day. Even if one theory was still a flop, there was still the next one that would probably be a lot better. matpat even covered things like YouTube topics. And these were always pretty interesting whenever he did them, because it was typically analysis of something like the algorithm. Well, for the most part, these YouTube theories were interesting and good time capsules for the time. There is a couple theories I do think are just plain wrong. Like the Wii U is the next Virtual Boy. Yeah, I've done an entire video debunking this. The Wii U was just kind of a victim of Nintendo's very questionable marketing. The Virtual Boy was just kind of a bad console that was too expensive to make and just too expensive in general. It was just not profitable. And staring at a red screen for so long is not a good idea, as that's a giant eyesore. It is a pretty cool idea, but even still, nowadays, VR is still not there yet. So what made you think that they could do it back then? And yes, I do have an entire video planned on VR. Good thing Mimo isn't here, because she'd be mad at me for adding things to the backlog. But still, a few bad theories here and there is just kind of expected. Not every video is going to be a banger. That does beg the question, what are the real problems with game theory? Short answer, it's a bit complicated and there's actually quite a bit of them. I would say the problems in the early days was matpat trying to diverge too much from himself and game theory as a whole. While the other shows definitely had their charm, they just weren't game theory. And something like crossovers, for instance, has aged very badly just due to the fact that Fortnite exists. While they were cool in concept, again, they were better off on their own channels. It also seems as of late that game theory has seemingly removed a lot of their other shows, as I could not actually find footage for digressing and side questing. At least the original footage anyway. So I don't know if they privated it or just actually completely deleted the videos. Oh hey, it's me again. I actually forgot an entire show during this entire recording, but was reminded by Mimo. So yeah, even if she's not in this episode, her presence is still being known. That being Deadlock. No, not the Valve title, the game theory show. I completely forgot about this initially, and yeah, that was for a good reason. This show was kinda hit or miss to a large extent. I know I say that a lot, but in general, Deadlock was just not very good. It did have some decent moments, but there was just a lot of times game theory just got things insanely wrong. Probably the most infamous of them all is the Team Fortress 2 vs. Overwatch episode. An episode that pretty much pissed off everybody. So congratulations, matpat, you've managed to unite Team Fortress 2 players and Overwatch players in hating you. And yeah, there's a ton of things wrong with this episode. But I don't really need to say much other than the fact that they mentioned Team Deathmatch for Team Fortress 2. Okay, I rewatched the video again, and yeah, it's way worse than I actually remembered it being. Let's go over a few things that they got wrong on top of Team Deathmatch nonsense.
If you want to play as a scout, wearing a Dovahkiin helmet, wielding a giant fish as a weapon, you can.
No, you cannot equip the Dovahkiin helmet on Scout. That is a heavy-only cosmetic.
Fortress is also objective-based, but features things like kill-death ratios and rewards for dominating the enemy, stats and achievements that are directly tied to killing the opponent repeatedly. This makes it much less appealing to play as, say, a healer or other support character, since they're not as likely to get impressive numbers in those areas.
The domination system works for assist, which medics are pretty much guaranteed to get because they get priority for assists. Legitimately, the only thing I agree with is that Team Fortress 2 does have too many maps. That's only because of hindsight and Valve just keeps adding more maps, and a lot of them are just kind of bad. Oh, and then there's this poorly aged line.
Fortress 2 updates multiple times a year with free content on top of the game being free, and it's been doing this for 9 years.
That one didn't age quite so well.
Yeah, this entire video was just painful for me to watch. I remembered it being bad, but I did not remember it being this bad. And don't even get me started on that meme machine line. Oh dear, that made me cringe. A reminder, this video was meant to be fun. If you played Team Fortress 2, you would know Team Deathmatch is not an official game mode. Some people call things like 2 Fort unofficial Team Deathmatch because the matches last so long, and that's pretty much what everyone does on 2 Fort, but it's still not Team Deathmatch. The closest thing to an official Team Deathmatch game mode is Arena, but literally nobody plays Arena. In fact, I'm pretty sure most people don't know Arena exists. Oh, and Mimo wants to say something.
This fucking idiot did not even say it's just a theory one time. What kind of idiot is this?
Oh, sorry, I had to cut Mimo off last second because she was going on a rant because I didn't say, it's just a theory, a game theory one time. Are you happy now?
No.
Oh, right, I forgot. You're never happy. Anyways, back to me. But still, the point still stands. I think a big problem, child, was definitely FNAF. Now, I don't blame anyone for jumping on trends. You gotta make money somehow, especially in this economy. And FNAF was especially a big thing at the time. Everyone was talking about it. I mean, it was really cool and unique at the time. There truly wasn't anything like Five Nights at Freddy's for a long while, and it was unique and fresh for the time. Nowadays, mascot horror is a bit oversaturated to a point where you don't want to see it anymore, but at the time, it was fresh and new. The problem is, it kind of seemed like at points they were relying on FNAF as a crutch. Oh sure, it was great in the early days, but can we please have something other than another FNAF theory? Like, it was fine back then because it was fresh and new. Now it's just kind of oversaturated and getting old. I feel like this has led to the unintended consequence of game theory slowly over time being less and less about science and more about lore. Granted, lore was always a part of game theory since the beginning, really, but it was never the main focus. It was a focus. But over time, game theory slowly shifted more towards being lore theory. And while that's fine, the problem is people came to game theory for science, not lore. And slowly but surely the science slowly began to become eroded away. But matpat's solution to this was The Science Of, starring Austin from the chadcat. Yeah, this was pretty terrible. Not a lot of people liked The Science Of, which you'd think would contradict my point, except there's a lot of history with Austin and the chadcat. To keep the chadcat history brief, it was a Fallout channel dedicated to, Fallout content and a couple other games, with one of their most popular series being The Storyteller, a big in-universe loredom, and the other was Rethinking Fallout with Austin, and it was well loved. So why did The Science Of fail? Well, if you compare his Rethinking Fallout 3 video to The Science Of, you'll see the problem almost immediately. Austin tried way too hard to be relatable and, entertaining, and he ended up coming off as annoying. Kind of ironic, but that's kind of how it ended up being. And it doesn't help that the Science Of thumbnails and the regular game theory thumbnails over time slowly became homogenized to the point where you could not really tell the difference. So in other words, you might be thinking you're getting a matpat video, but in reality you're getting a Science Of video. So that did not help the series at all. Which actually segues me into a big reason I kind of just stopped caring, was just the thumbnails. Yeah, I don't like the newer thumbnails. I think they're just bland and uninteresting. It's really ironic given that these are meant to be eye-catching thumbnails, yet they kind of do the opposite for me. They're kind of trying way too hard to be eye-catching with these thumbnails and titles. It's like, what were you guys thinking? This is just bad. I'm not saying the older game theory thumbnails were any better, mind you. There is literally a video called Best Booba in Gaming. No, I am not saying the actual name because YouTube's gonna get very mad at me. And from the thumbnail and title, what is this video about? It's about which video game characters have realistic booba. Yeah, game theory has always been doing this. But the difference is the layer thumbnails just lack soul. Especially when it comes to something like horror, it's always something like,
This game is evil, you cannot trust it. Or this game will take your soul.
like, it just kinda gets old and repetitive and it stops being interesting after a point. When game theory covers a horror game, you know it's gonna be mediocre. But you might say this helps the game reach a broader audience, and yes and no. There is such a thing as bad exposure. In fact, if game theory covers something, it's more than likely going to turn someone off from the project, because of something I'm going to get into a little bit later. Thus, they're not going to think it's actually any good and probably just think it's just kind of slop. Someone I think actually does this well is Manly Badass Hero. You might have heard of him, or at least heard his voice. He covers a lot of indie horror games and sometimes not indie horror games. But by all accounts does feature a lot of indie games on his channel. Games like Mouthwashing, Slay the Princess, Buckshot Roulette, all those games were covered by Manly at one point. And not every game gets that level of attention, but my point still stands. It does a lot more good when Manly does a video on something than does game theory. And why is that exactly? In general, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that game theory over time stopped being evergreen. Now this whole thing is a bit of a complicated topic, so allow me to explain. Evergreen content is something you can just watch repeatedly and it will still age fine. A lot of older YouTube content, ironically enough, is evergreen by accident. The other kind of content is contemporary content. You know, the one you're meant to just watch once and then forget about it later. It's not all bad, it's just not something you're meant to remember. Watch once and forget type of deal. Like the news, for instance. Or the most recent YouTube drama. And it feels like game theory over time shifted from being evergreen to just contemporary. I'm not gonna use the term schlop as I think that's a bit too overused and a bit too specific. And doesn't necessarily apply here. You can see this about theories that are just kind of the popular thing now. Like the most recent thing is Ben 10. Ben 10 over time has gotten a lot more popular due to the fact that a lot of people that grew up with the series are now starting to realize how good it actually was. In big part due to individuals like Kuro the artist of the Ink Tank, and just the Ink Tank in general to be honest. Problem is, a lot of times they just get things wrong, or do surface level research. And a lot of times the newer theories kinda just feel like they come up with a conclusion and thus form evidence around said conclusion. Like the Omnitrix is killing Ben 10 theory, which is completely bunk. Maybe for the classic series alone, but in Omniverse, he literally took an entire Big Bang because the Omnitrix has a failsafe feature for that sort of thing. Yeah, the Omnitrix literally protected Ben from a literal Big Bang. I don't think it's killing him, I think it's doing quite the opposite. Or in the Has-Been Hotel review, when he called the Immediate Murder Professionals the Immediate Murder Patrol.
The real twist hiding at the end of both of these shows is that the Immediate Murder Patrol, IMP, the Immediate Murder Professionals.
Yeah, how did that slip past editing, matpat? Even I tend to catch slip-ups before they make it into the actual video, and I'm just one guy. matpat has an entire team behind him. And especially something matpat has never been particularly good at is addressing criticism. Constructive criticism is always a good thing and you should take it at heart. Now that said, not all criticism is good criticism, and should rightfully be ignored. Problem is, you need to sift through the criticisms and actually improve. matpat has done none of this. And this has led to some theories that are just absolutely awful because there is no research into it. Like the Ace Attorney theory! Yeah, remember when I said sometimes feel like they come up with the conclusion first? Yeah, it definitely feels like this with the Ace Attorney theory. And the Persona theory, but I don't know much about Persona. I've never played Persona, nor Shin Megami Tensei, though I want to at some point. But the Ace Attorney theory is Phoenix Wright is a criminal because reasons. Oh, he did bad thing, therefore criminal. Please ignore the fact that everyone in this entire series has done the exact same thing, if not worse, to some degree. Look no further than Miles Edgeworth's own updated autopsy report. And yet Phoenix Wright is the bad guy here. But then again, I guess you could make the case that Phoenix is a fraud. Yeah, see where I'm going with this? There is a ton of theories that are just terrible that matpat has refused to acknowledge that he has made a mistake on. Like, some of these theories are factually wrong, and the only major time he has ever done this is with the Sans' Nest theory. But even then, that is because that theory was so terrible and such a humongous blunder that he just had to acknowledge it. If he kept going, he would make himself out to be a complete and utter idiot. Well, more than he already did, actually. And many of these problems especially carried over to his other channels like Film Theory. Film Theory over time just became about this random obscure horror series I found of the week type deal, and got real boring real quickly. The only channel I think for the longest time actually was pretty good and actually was my go-to for a while was Food Theory, as there's a lot of evergreen stuff on there. Granted, again, not all of it is good, and sometimes matpat gets things very wrong, like the Costco episode. Seriously, his excuse was, oh, you're not gonna drink this much coffee. matpat, that's not the point. And you're also stretching it a bit. The point is to buy what you need for the month, not for what you need now. So he completely misunderstands the whole point of things like Sam's Club or Costco. But things like the store brand video, the hamburger stacking order video, hell, even the Spashcock a turkey video. That thing is one of the most useful videos on YouTube. I still turn to it every once in a while when I need to know how to do that sort of thing. It was just fantastic. And then over time it became more and more like game theory schlop. And then I just stopped caring again. So we're back to square one. But it's now time to address the elephant in the room. That being the fact that matpat has a very young audience. And while that is fine, the problem is he pushed way too hard for said young audience. Kinda to the point where his content became contemporary by accident almost. It's now not about having a dedicated viewer base, it's now about having someone who will tune in for the flavor of the week kind of thing. Game theory slowly became more about appeasing children. And while that would be fine, I'm absolutely okay with children's content on this platform. The problem is, most child-friendly content on this platform sucks! I mean, it's just the most attention-grabbing, annoying, and just plain awful content. And don't even get me started on something like Coco Melon. If you think something like Coco Melon or Skibbity Toilet is bad, it will probably get worse in the future. Especially when this kind of content leads to Elsagate. Now, I'm not saying game theory is turning into Elsagate, I'm saying game theory is chasing a market that's not going to last. By their very nature, these viewers are not going to stick around. They're not going to be loyal, they're going to move on to the next thing. I feel like that's kind of just a huge problem on YouTube. These kids' channels have to keep going younger and younger just to appeal to the same kind of demographic, at the cost of any and all good quality content. Why game theory worked was because it was a show for everyone, and everyone could enjoy it. Nowadays, it feels like game theory's less for everyone and more for little Timmy on his iPad. And realistically, I don't blame matpat or anyone else. I blame YouTube. YouTube has really been pushing its luck as of late, and well, for a long while to be honest. Things like Elsagate should just not be allowed on this platform. Yet for some reason, they allow it. Yeah, remember when YouTube got hit by Kappa? You know what they did? They disabled comments, disabled the mini player, and made certain videos labeled as for kids. And there's a lot of videos that are just caught in the crossfire. But at the same time, there's a huge market for not kids content. It clearly makes a lot of money, at the cost of a consistent viewership. When matpat left, that was it. All the old viewers just kind of stopped caring. And while Matt himself might say, oh, they're more experienced, they're more professional than me, that was not the point. That was never the point. Yeah, the new host might have more experience, but they don't have the same personality, the same charm, the same history that matpat does. Yeah, matpat might not be the most professional food expert, but that was part of the fun. Yeah, he might not be a film buff, but that was part of the fun. Yeah, he might not understand a lot about style, but that was part of the fun. Part of the fun was matpat understanding the stuff and figuring it out for himself. He was a fish out of water. That made it interesting to watch. The new hosts just don't have that same kind of charm. On top of basically abandoning the old audience in favor of just having this new, more unstable audience, no one really cares anymore. Oh sure, they still get similar kind of views, but that's not the point. There is no cultural relevancy anymore. New game theory does not hit as hard as old game theory ever did, and probably never will for this reason. Now granted, I don't blame matpat one bit. He's a dad now, he's got priorities. But still, it is quite sad to see game theory as a hollow husk of what it once was. It stopped being a show for everyone and started being a show for little Timmy on his iPad. And some might say this is because game theory went corporate. I cannot say for sure. I know going corporate can be an absolute death sentence and can completely destroy something. I've seen it happen way too many times. Especially when you get the wrong kind of management. This will especially be relevant in a future video of mine. Whether that had a major impact on game theory's shift, it is quite notable. If you don't believe me that game theory shifted more towards kid-only content, let me ask you something. Why haven't they covered Me-Side yet? Yeah, Me-Side was insanely popular. Basically everyone was talking about it. Or something like the Coffin of Andy and Lele. No theory. Isn't that a bit weird? In fact, as I'm recording this, the latest episode of Game Theory is on Poppy's Playtime. So that should tell you everything. So what did ever happen to Game Theory? The simple answer is they were too focused on making kid content rather than good content and content everyone could enjoy. And slowly over time, Game Theory lost its core identity. But hey, don't feel bad, there's still plenty of content to enjoy on this platform. And hell, be happy that matpat was one of the few that actually made it. He was just a broke, nerdy theater kid when he first started Game Theory, and now he's one of the most loved figures on the internet. He's an internet legend, as it were. Let's just hope he's remembered for all the right reasons. But with that, that's actually all for now. If you enjoyed this video, well, I'm glad. What, were you expecting me to like beg? No, we don't do that around here. Anyway, if you have some honest feedback, please leave it in the comments section down below. It's not necessary, but I am interested in improving. All I ask is that you be respectful and disagree politely. With that, maybe I'll see you all next time. Probably not. Either way, goodbye.